Duncan Olney here at Blog Indiana with Jason Falls. Jason, welcome to Indianapolis.
No, thanks. Good to be here.
So, Jason, the name of your company is Social Media Explorer, and you've had a ton of experience working marketing in regulated industries.
Yep.
And can you maybe give our viewers a couple of tips on some of the things that are the right approach to take in working in regulated industries?
Sure. I think regulated industries, and that could be banking and finance, insurance, healthcare, the spirits industry, which I'm very familiar with. The biggest challenge I think you face is that the legal teams and the compliance staff doesn't understand the technology and doesn't understand what it does. So their instant reaction is always to say no. What you have to do is you have to build a case for them to say yes, and the only way they're going to is if you explain the technology to them. So in that role as a social media consultant or even a PR consultant that's doing social media, you really have to go in with the mindset of an educator. You have to teach them, what a link is and what it means and how the software reads the link, especially when you have, for instance, in the spirits industry, you have an age requirement that you need to implement on your websites. Well, can you publish an RSS feed on a website? Because technically, if that RSS URL gets shared with other people, it could be passed on to someone underage, and you don't want that. So you just have to explain the technology to them. And once they understand the technology, more often than not, if they're interested in helping you market the product or service, they're going to find a way to say yes within the rules.
So, and then the whole LPA thing, right? And I know there's rules and regulations, but I know there's also ways for, depending on your brand's goals, for you to get that awareness by sponsoring a team and then covering what the team's doing, on Twitter or blogs. I guess the question is, what are the possible paths for say a financial services company, and what kinds of things do you recommend them doing?
Well, when you get into financial services and healthcare, more often than not, you're getting into a couple different things. First of all, if they're publicly traded, that's a whole new layer of regulations that you have to worry about, because there's rules with the Securities and Exchange Commission on how information is disseminated relative to investor relations and things of that nature. But if you're talking about insurance or you're talking about healthcare, more often than not, they have specific legal compliances on what they can say and cannot say in terms of what they sell, advice that they give, particularly when you get into healthcare and medical advice.
Right.
That's extremely touchy
All the liability.
Areas. There's a lot of liability there, and there's also a lot of privacy violations you have to watch out for with HIPAA laws and things of that nature. So what you have to do is you have to try to create social media or internet marketing opportunities for these companies that take all that into consideration and say, okay, what are the objections that the compliance staff is going to have? So let's remove them. If letting comments go live without some sort of moderation is a concern, then moderate the comments. But make sure your audience knows you're moderating the comments and why. More often than not, your audience is going to be accepting of that. You just have to sort of let them know, look, we're in a regulated industry. We can't go willy-nilly into social media like everybody else can, because we have to follow the rules. Within these rules, here's what we can do. Your audience is going to understand as long as you're honest with them.
And what about in your mind, a couple of sort of inspiring cases where people have done, on the liquor side maybe, where people have done a great job of conversating with the audience?
Well, I think there's a lot of spirits brands that have done some pretty interesting things. Certainly I'd like to think that I've done some good things in my former role with Beam Global Spirits and Wine with Jim Beam and Maker's Mark and a couple other brands. But I think there's a lot of brands out there that are doing some interesting things. I know that there's, I think it's Templeton Rye Whiskey is on Twitter and has been for over a year, probably almost 2 years now. And they do a really good job of having conversations with consumers. I liked some of the sort of big bucket YouTube, promotions the Smirnoffs of the world are doing and things of that nature, because they're advertising, but they're actually trying to advertise through an engagement mechanism on YouTube, where there's some conversation and some audience there. I haven't seen anything in the spirits industry, even with my own work, quite frankly, I'll admit that I would say is earth-shattering or groundbreaking. But again, there's a lot of factors in that. You can take an earth-shattering idea to a spirits company, and by the time it gets through all the compliance and legal and filters and input from the brand manager, it winds up being either watered down or not even what you wanted in the first place. So I don't think there's anything earth-shattering out there yet, but that's what's great about it. There's so much opportunity.
There's so much opportunity, yeah. It sort of takes a balance of courage and realistically evaluating the risks.
Absolutely.
So.